Welcome to the Yoga Hour, Living the Eternal Way, offering insights and practices for spiritually conscious living today with Yogacharya Ellen Grace O'Brien from the Center for Spiritual Enlightenment in San Jose, California. To ask questions or join in the discussion, email us at theyogahour@unityonlineradio.org. Now, here's your host, Yogacharya Ellen Grace O'Brien.
Good morning and welcome to the Yoga Hour, a time to open our hearts and minds to the infinite. I'm Dr. Laurel Trujillo, hosting a special conversation today with the Yoga Hour's founder, Yogacharya Ellen Grace O'Brien. Today we'll be sharing some insights and time-tested practices from the ancient system of Kriya Yoga. And while yoga, the word itself, is very familiar to most people today in America, it is usually heard as in a very limited fashion, as some form of physical exercise or stretching perhaps. But actually, yoga is a Sanskrit word that means oneness, union, or unity. The bringing together of our attention and awareness with our essential spiritual nature to be restored to our original wholeness. And our topic today is 4 goals for spiritually conscious living: purpose, prosperity, pleasure, and freedom. And this is the first episode of a monthly series on Dharma, where Yogacharya will be joining me in a conversation every month. So today we're going to be discussing the 4 goals that are essential for spiritually conscious living, the importance of knowing what they are, and the steps to achieving them. And as I said, I'm very fortunate today to have Yogacharya O'Brien here with me and to be starting on this new series on Dharma. As many listeners know, Yogacharya Ellen Grace O'Brien is the founding director and host of this program, the Yoga Hour. She's an acclaimed spiritual teacher, writer, poet, and founder and spiritual director of the Center for Spiritual Enlightenment, a Kriya Yoga meditation center with headquarters in San Jose, California. She was ordained to teach in the Kriya Yoga tradition by her guru, Roy Eugene Davis, in 1982. Yogacharya teaches nationally and internationally and has received several community service awards, including the 2015 Mahatma Gandhi Award for the promotion of religious pluralism. Her new book of poetry, The Moon Reminded Me, was published earlier this year. And her websites are ellengraceobrien.com and csecenter.org. Welcome, Yogacharya. Welcome, Umaji. I'm so delighted that we can have this conversation today on the Yoga Hour.
This is really wonderful to be with you in this way and to have the opportunity to talk about Dharma, a topic that's so important to our lives and really close to my heart.
Well, great. So before we dive into our dialogue about Dharma and starting with the 4 goals for spiritually conscious living, would you lead us in a brief meditation?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. With the sound of Om, the primal sound, the natural mantra to soothe the mental field and help us turn inward, let's pause for a moment of meditation. So just take this moment as your yoga moment, a moment to breathe, a moment to let your mind become quiet, a moment to reconnect with your essence of being, your essential self. So with your breath now, breathe in and feel your breath. Feel the air as it enters your nostrils. Feel it touch back of your throat. Feel your lungs expand, your abdomen. And then gently contract Feel the muscles pulling in and the warm air moving back out through your nostrils. Just simple and easy breath and awareness of that breath. We don't try to change the breath. We just observe it. It's like you could just stand at the doorway of your own breath, like your breath is moving in and out of that building we call the body, and you are the doorkeeper of the breath. So you watch the breath come in, you observe the breath move out again. And now as you feel the breath move in, see if you can gently straighten your spine, sit up a little straighter, have your head erect, move your shoulders back and down. And with that body position that is intentional, to be awake and aware, just notice the fullness of this moment, your own wholeness, your own completeness, your own satisfaction with just being who you are right here and right now. At the heart, this is yoga, being restored to wholeness, returning to our true self. Let's take the peace that we find within now and share it with all beings everywhere. Let your attention move out now and take that inner peace with an intention to share it with all beings everywhere. Peace, peace, peace.
Oh, thank you so much, Umaji. That was really lovely. I love beginning our conversations with that little bit of grounding meditation.
Yeah, it's great to do unless you're driving in a car and listening to the podcast, and then you should do the meditation part later.
That's right. So welcome as a guest, or for this series of conversations, I should say, to the Yoga Hour. And I'm really looking forward to these conversations and the ability to explore the many facets of Dharma with you. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we're going to start this conversation about the 4 main goals of life, which include Dharma. So these 4 goals were actually set forth in the Vedas, the oldest scripture known to humanity. And as I mentioned, the 4 goals are purpose, prosperity, pleasure, and freedom. So how did you first become interested in these 4 goals?
Well, I think for me, hearing about these goals as I studied the teachings of Kriya Yoga, it was very heartening to me to find that the spiritual life could be and should be so practical. That yoga is really a how to live system, how to live and be spiritually awake and aware and be able to be fulfilled, be able to make a contribution to life while we're here. So it interested me profoundly to hear the teachings that Paramahansa Yogananda put forth saying, we should not separate the spiritual and the material. And of course, he had heard this from his guru and other teachers in the lineage that this expression of the reality that we call God or spirit is a continuum. And so there is no separation between the material and the spiritual realms. We have different ways of talking about it, but it's one life, one reality. And so, for me, finding out that living my spiritual life was was really learning how to live, a purposeful life was really heartening to me.
Well, that's great, and I love that comment or that statement about the spiritual plane not being different from the earthly plane, it's all on a continuum. So, what are the benefits that you have seen in your own life from learning about these 4 goals?
Well, I think as I was just pointing out, we could start there. The idea that our spiritual life, our spiritual practice is not something to take us out of the world, but it is something that will have us become more effective at living our lives in a higher way. We're talking about these goals, and we look at Dharma, the first goal. It's really living with higher purpose. It's learning to live our life in harmony with the infinite. And so the benefit of that is that, I could probably take the whole program just listing them, but it is that we come to live in a very different way in which life is seen as holy. That's what I would say. Life is seen as holy. It's sacred, and it's not an idea about life. It's the reality of life that we're living in the aliveness of God, and we are in this cooperative relationship with the infinite. And so the goals of life as set forth in the Vedas are to help us learn that, how to live a fulfilled life, how to live a purposeful life, and how to live a life in harmony with the infinite. So I would say the greatest benefit for me is that my life with yoga became multidimensional, not two-dimensional like me and it, but just being in the midst of this shimmering one reality, this aliveness that is everything.
Just beautiful. So this is the Yoga Hour, this program, and we talk about Kriya Yoga. So how do these 4 goals of life that came from the Vedas, how do they relate to Kriya Yoga?
Well, Kriya Yoga, many people are familiar with from Paramahansa Yogananda's book, The Autobiography of a Yogi, which is a classic for spiritual seekers and has been since it came out in the 1940s. So people often associate Kriya Yoga with the practices that he talks about in that book of meditation practices, of pranayama practices that are scientific and that lead to higher states of consciousness. And Kriya Yoga is that, but it is so much more than that. And really, Kriya Yoga is a system. It's a how to live system. It's a how to live a spiritual life that is practical and is focused and is in integrity with the truth of our being. So I found that these 4 goals, of course, are just inherent to the Kriya Yoga system, because Kriya Yoga is about waking up. It's about, let's say, living up, to our highest potential. Yeah. So it's about waking up and living up.
Oh, that's great. So, as I mentioned earlier, our series is going to be about Dharma, or purpose, which is the first of the 4 goals. And the Sanskrit word Dharma has many different meanings. So can you run through some of those with us and talk about how you define Dharma?
Well, I think I should say that, there are texts such as the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita, which of course is a part of the Mahabharata. And these ancient texts are, in a sense, all about defining what Dharma is. So,
right.
To say in a few words what Dharma is, it doesn't quite do it service, but it's a Sanskrit word, and the literal translation is what holds together. What holds together. And if we think about the meaning of that, it refers to this fundamental sense of order, that which upholds all of life. So it has to do with this sense of divine order, the basis of all things working and being in harmony. So Dharma is sometimes called the way of righteousness, or simply the way with a capital T and a capital W. So it has to do, of course, with purpose, but purpose is in a way secondary to Dharma. What is fundamental to Dharma is that it refers to the order of things, that which makes life what it is, and that divine order which we are a part of, we are an expression of, and usually until we wake up, we don't pay much attention to that. When we wake up, we start asking the question of, well, how do I live in harmony with this divine order? It touches every area of our life. It touches the moral conscience that we have, the social order, the family order. So sometimes it's also defined as a religious duty, or just duty. It has to do with what is ours to do. In this overall fundamental divine order of things. So Dharma is what holds the stars up.
Yeah. That's beautiful. So you touched on this a little bit, but you've been describing more this global sense of Dharma that, of course, everyone should follow. But in addition, we also each have our own individual life purpose, or Swadharma. So how do Dharma and Swadharma relate?
Well, in a sense, of course, Swadharma I see is really a subset of Dharma. We can say our overarching Dharma, our overarching purpose that is the same for everyone, is to awaken spiritually, and to come to see, and by see, I mean realize this divine order that pervades all of life, and this higher purpose, that we are here to awaken to it, to know that it exists, and not only to know that it exists, but that it is expressing as each and every one of us. So in that sense, we are it. So, our overarching Dharma is to awaken to the truth of our being, and then to learn to live from that perspective, so that's a big shift, from living from the egoic perspective of, I am, whatever, my role, my personality, my body-mind complex, to, I am the divine in expression. I am part of all that is. I am part of this fundamental order. I'm part of this majesty of the universe. And, how I live in that divine order makes a difference. And the more that I try to get and live for myself alone, the more I bring suffering to myself and others. And the more that I can expand my consciousness and live from the perspective of wholeness, of oneness, the more I can bring forth compassion and healing and blessing for others and for myself in the world. So we all share that overarching Dharma is the same for every person at every time. It was the same for our parents and grandparents and their parents and grandparents, and in whatever country you live in, whatever culture you live in, Dharma, that fundamental Dharma is the same. Wake up and learn to see this reality of God, live in harmony with it. And then Swadharma, has to do with our individual expression. That has to do with the time that we're living in. It has to do with our role in society, our role in the family, what our responsibilities are at an individual level. And it has to do with what our gifts are. So, sometimes people think about, Swadharma in terms of, what are my individual talents? And how can I express, these creative urges that I have, or, skills that I have? And that is certainly a part of it, but it's not the only part of it, because this fundamental part of Dharma is responsibility or duty that to the whole. And so Swadharma also carries that as we look at responsibility that we have to our family, to our community as well. So, all of that is about teaching us how to be a global or a divine global citizen, right?
Yes. So, as I mentioned, you had a new book of poetry out earlier this year called The Moon Reminded Me, and several of the poems in that book really relate to the spiritual journey of awakening to our higher purpose. Would you share a poem from The Moon Reminded Me with us?
Oh, sure. I would love to do that. And I'm thinking about, how I was talking about waking up to this beauty of life, waking up to this shimmering reality that is infinite potential that is our life. So I thought about this poem called The Beloved's Gift. It's really about how life is always inviting us to wake up. As I'm sitting here talking with you, I can look out my window and there's been a little monarch butterfly dancing around at the top of the little tree outside my window, and the light just touching that. And nature, of course, is a great way to call us to remember the divine, and beauty is often, I think, one of God's calling cards. So this is kind of like that, just waking up to the beauty of it. It's called The Beloved's Gift. Everything shines in the pure light of morning. Everything shines in the pure light of morning. Even we who close our eyes at night, weary of the world, awaken each day the glimmering kiss of the Beloved still shining upon our brows. Hear the call comes. Blades of grass hear it, standing in the meadow as brides, wearing beads of radiance, the color of surrender. The call comes. Blades of grass hear it, standing in the meadow as brides, wearing beads of radiance, the color of surrender. Hear the call. Hasten to prayer as they do. Turn to the one who has kissed you. Bend before love.
Really beautiful.
Thank you.
And with that, we're moving to the break. You've been listening to the Yoga Hour with our special conversation today with Yogacharya Ellen Grace O'Brien, founder and the host of the Yoga Hour. You can find out more about Yogacharya and her work at the websites ellengraceobrien.com and csecenter.org. We welcome your comments and questions. You can contact us at yogahour@unity.fm. I'm Dr. Laurel Trujillo, And when we come back from the break, we'll explore more about the 4 goals and how to attain them. Stay with us.
If Unity Online Radio has helped you grow spiritually through programs like this one, please consider supporting this online radio programming. Visit www.unity.fm and click on Donate Now. Thank you for helping us continue to serve as the voice of an awakening world.
This is Reverend Ellen Debenport at Unity Village. Unity is supporting our friends who are dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey. Unity of Houston has offered to be a clearinghouse for donations that it will use to help others in the area. Or you could give to the Red Cross or other agencies, or just Google Harvey how to help. But the most powerful thing you can do is to pray. Call Silent Unity 24/7 at 1-800-NOW-PRAY or go online to unity.org. We are all one, and we will get through this together.
You're listening to the Yoga Hour, Living the Eternal Way, with Yogacharya Ellen Grace O'Brien. We now return to the Yoga Hour.
Welcome back to the Yoga Hour. I'm Dr. Laurel Trujillo. And I'm joined today by the Yoga Hour's regular host, Yogacharya Ellen Grace O'Brien. Yogacharya has published several books and audio programs about meditation, mindfulness, and spiritual living, and her current online course is quite relevant to our topic today. It's called Dharma 365, A Year of Living Purposefully. You can find out more about Dharma 365 at the website ellengraceobrien.com. and more about the Center for Spiritual Enlightenment at csecenter.org. So we are talking about the 4 goals in life for spiritually conscious living. And before the break, we were talking about Svadharma, or individual life purpose, and we're going to be talking a lot about Dharma and Svadharma in the coming months, but Umaji, how about a little preview? If you don't know your life's purpose, how do you go about finding it? What practices will help?
I think it's helpful not to worry about it too much. One thing I notice is there's a certain quality of desperation that kicks in for people sometimes, when they hear these 4 goals, and, life is like live your life with purpose, and, you are here according to divine purpose. And then people get literally, beside themselves, which I think is such a great saying, because we don't want to be beside ourselves. We want to occupy ourselves, be fully connected to ourselves, because that's where we discover, our divine unfoldment. So the first thing is, don't worry about it, because awareness of it will will gradually unfold. And it's not, Dharma is less something that you need to go and do, and it's more about, what we are becoming, what we are to be, how the qualities of God, the divine qualities, can express within us. So first I say, don't worry about it. And because then, as you follow your spiritual practice and you meditate and the mind gets more quiet, your intuition naturally gets stronger, and you begin, you just live in the question, right? What is mine to do and to be? And who do I need to be in order for God to be God in me, for that to express more fully? And so your intuition awakens, and also when we meditate, we remove some of the obstructions that keep us from bumping into divine support. And, divine support is always there. And when we, stop fussing and worrying and so much, and we just can sit down and get clear,
yes.
Things become clearer to us, and we find opportunities open up that are of interest to us, and the path gets lit from the inside. And then I would say one other thing. I remember my teacher saying early on that, of course, worked like magic for me, which is, if you don't know what is yours to do, then serve someone who's doing something that inspires you. And so that was my path of, discovering my Swadharma, was to the best of my ability, serving my teacher, supporting his work as I could early on in the world, whatever that meant. Maybe I set up the book table when he came and, passed out literature, just did whatever I could do to help people find out about his work. I didn't have a work. I wasn't teaching at the time. But his work had really inspired me, transformed my life. And so I wanted to help that. And so sometimes when we'll just take a step towards, lifting up someone or something that resonates with us, then along the way, our gifts are revealed to us, and like I say, the path is lit from within.
Yes. And I really wanted to double underline what you were saying about meditation, and my own experience about that is that it's so helpful to awaken my intuition. That clarity that you were talking about that comes, with a meditation practice is just so helpful. To have an intuition that's more, like the volume's turned up a little bit or something, and then the discernment becomes keener. You can see more clearly, like you're saying, the light turns up from within. So we're going to be talking a lot more about Dharma, but why don't we turn to the second goal of Artha, or prosperity, listed by the Vedas. And when we say prosperity, it's not just any kind of prosperity. It's the prosperity needed for one to accomplish one's Dharma. So how do you view this goal, the second goal of prosperity, or Artha, and how does it differ from just prosperity as in material accumulation of things, including wealth?
Well, it's interesting, that as far as I have seen in, spiritual traditions that I've looked into, there's always this conundrum about wealth. And you can find, you can weigh in on the other side of that issue. Either side, you can find scriptural support, even in the Vedas, or certainly in Hebrew scriptures or Christian scriptures. You can find support on either side. Is wealth good or bad? Is wealth good? Yes. Is it bad? Yes. And so, the answer is it depends on how it is used. It depends on how one comes to it. It depends on how it is used. And so I was really delighted to find wealth as one of the 4 great goals of life, because it puts it in the perspective of a spiritual framework. And so generally you see the 4 goals of life in the order of, Dharma. Dharma is a higher purpose, living in harmony with the infinite. Artha, or wealth, but it comes in relationship to Dharma. So this means that the wealth that we acquire needs to be in harmony with the divine order of things. So it can't be wealth that comes, in an unethical way, for example. And we hold it in relationship to, how we contribute to the well-being of all, and to living with a higher purpose, and to being able to fulfill what is ours to do. And so it's interesting that we find in the scriptures, like I say, sometimes they can say wealth can be the greatest burden, because it can be a complete distraction and take a person into bondage, because the natural human tendency, if it's not held in the restraint of Dharma, is simply to want more and more. And I think, all of us, I would be surprised if somebody said they haven't experienced it. I don't know what I would say about that, because no matter what it is, we get one. If it's a thing, you get that thing, and after a while, you want another thing, and and either you want a new version of the thing you had, the latest version of it, or you just want more of it. So it's just it's a natural tendency of the desire mechanism to want more and more. And so, held in the dharmic framework, artha is to be able to curb that desire for personal accumulation or greed, and to be able to transform that desire, which is a natural desire, into a higher order of contributing to the well-being of others as well.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. I would be surprised too to meet someone who said they didn't relate to that. Mm-hmm. So turning to the 3rd goal now, I think people are often surprised to see the goal of pleasure, or kama, in this list. And I think it's because the idea of pursuing a goal of pleasure doesn't really sound very spiritual. So what does pleasure mean in the context of the 4 life goals?
Well, first let's say, isn't it very interesting? I think it is part, perhaps, I don't know. I don't know if it's part of the Western mindset. I was going to say that, but I don't know. I think all religious traditions have some far end of austerity to them that is body denying and life denying. We find that in scriptures from the East. We find it in the of yoga as well. And so there's that, we're back to that division, between body and spirit, right? The earth and the heavens, and those fundamental splits like that are really not healthy for us to be able to recognize the wholeness of it all and to live our lives completely. And so first it's just interesting to recognize that we have some kind of inherited idea that if you're spiritual, your life is not going to be pleasurable, which, would be a really good reason why people would stay away from the spiritual path.
Well, it sounds very Puritan, doesn't it?
Well, I guess, yeah, that's what I was going to say about our heritage. But then again, I was just thinking, when we look at all the traditions, we can certainly find scriptures that are about, denying the body and the pleasures of the body. But, it's the same thing, really, energetically, as how we look at wealth. It has to do, with the purpose and understanding the mechanism, of desire, really. But back to your question, what does it mean in the context of the 4 life goals? For me, it means that we're here to fulfill our purpose of living a divine life. And part of living a divine life is being able to live in joy. And there's a connection between pleasure and joy. Our quality of the soul is joy, ananda, or bliss. And so it's discovering, how life can be joy, and in a sense what the higher joy is. And if your spiritual practice doesn't have any joy in it, it's not really spiritual practice, it's just punishment.
Right, and much harder to stick with.
Exactly.
If you're in that. Well, I was thinking about just some of the really simple, wonderful joys of life, like to have a beautiful day, or as you were talking about earlier, to watch a butterfly, outside your window. And there's that, mindfulness or quality of awareness that enhances that, pleasure. And, brings us into those, wonderful moments of fullness.
Yeah, and we have now, some really good reports coming out from the field of neuroscience about our health and our well-being, and how these things that bring us pleasure, that bring us joy, de-stress our system. Right? Mm-hmm. Remove stress from the body and mind, So, even better than watching the butterfly out my window is to go outside in my window to sit in the garden, and just feel the breeze, and or go for a walk. Just going out into nature is a great way to feel pleasure. And as I said, this pleasure that de-stresses the body and mind, that helps us, be clearer, right? To be able to be more responsive to the divine urge within us. And the other thing that can bring us joy and is really an important part of our spiritual life, important part of our life period, is our relationships. Mm-hmm. And, oftentimes when people come on the spiritual path, that's their stress point. Relationship is a stress point for people. All kinds of things, not having emotional maturity is a stressor, not having a healthy environment, addiction in the relationship, or, whatever the problems are in relationships. So a lot of times that will drive people to the spiritual path, because there's that fundamental need to have connection that we have, and to have healthy connection. And that's part of what brings us joy, and is one of the factors really that contributes to a longevity for human beings, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes, social interaction. There's really no question. There's a huge body of evidence about that it really extends people's lives.
Mm-hmm. So there's joy. There should be joy in that. But I want to put in a plug for this, because Kriya Yoga and the spiritual practices being practical, because you dive into Kriya Yoga and you learn these relational principles, what we call the yamas and niyamas, the restraints and observances that really teach us how to be in a relationship consciously. So relationships get healed, as we get healed, as we become self-sufficient, we stop being so needy, and all those things that happen. And then, our relationships can be a source of joy and pleasure for us, and not a point of pain and suffering.
So suffering. So that actually turns us to the fourth goal, which is freedom, liberation, or moksha. So in this context, what does freedom or liberation mean here as one of the 4 life goals?
Well, it means waking up. It means being enlightened, free from false identification, with the body and mind, thinking that's what we are, right. That we were born, we will die, with the body and the mind. It's recognizing that we are spiritual beings. We came from somewhere and we return there. We are not limited to this body-mind identity. So it's liberation from that false idea, and also liberation from unconsciously acting out of habitual patterns, in the subconscious mind.
Exactly. You have touched on that already a little bit about being able to respond to something rather than just triggered into a reaction. So I think Yogananda was really, really clear about liberation being something that was attainable for everyone and not just for the most spiritually advanced, those few people, maybe up in the Himalayas in a cave or something. Mm-hmm. So can you say a little bit more about that, how liberation is really something that's available to all of us?
Well, it's available because it's simply the revelation of the truth, of what we are as spiritual beings. It's freedom from what is not true. It's freedom from false identification. So, in the Kriya Yoga tradition, it's taught, from the very beginning, for us that it's our destiny to awaken. I always think of it like, well, what's true is ultimately going to reveal itself. At some point, it's just truth will rise. I love that thought. The truth just rises and it is revealed. And so, it's offered, as the certain destiny of every person, because it's the truth of every person. It's already what we are. So that is why there's such an emphasis that it is possible, because doesn't have to do with becoming something that you're not. Freedom is our divine inheritance. And at some point, we come to recognize that. And that is this path of, waking up. So it is for everyone. And, the main obstacle, I think, that we have to this is thinking that it's not possible for us. So we're encouraged on the path of Kriya Yoga to put that idea aside and to recognize it's possible because it's as possible as our own existence.
Yeah, lovely. So unbelievably, we have just a couple more minutes left. And I was wondering if you wanted maybe to share another poem, or did you just want to maybe do a little, last little summary of some encouragement or inspiration that people might come away from this program with?
I think I'll close with a poem about attending to the self. It's this poem about meditation. Sometimes I say, when you meditate, just let your mind sink into your heart with the breath that you just drop down into your essential nature. So this poem is called Anahat, and Anahat is the Sanskrit term for the heart chakra, the heart center, or not the physical heart, but the spiritual heart. And Anahat means unstruck, and it refers to this constantly available, constantly resounding vibration of Om, the primal sound, the holy word, that resonance that is evidence of the divine presence within us and all around us. So it's called Anahat. Listen with presence. Like the fingers of a cellist, listen to the strings. Like the moon listens to the sun. like a bee listens to the fuchsia bell and loses himself in the whirl. Like the mind listens to the heart, tastes the sound of bliss, and meets the self again.
Just lovely.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Laurel, Dr. Trujillo. It's such a pleasure getting to have this conversation about Dharma, and I'm so appreciative of your work with the Yoga Hour. It's fabulous. I thank you. I thank the whole team, and thank you for mentioning the Dharma 365 course, too. We're really enjoying that, and anybody can join in any time for that.
Yes. So once again, if you're interested in that Dharma 365 course, you can find out more about it at the website ellengraceobrian.com, and O'Brien is OBRIAN.com. You've been listening to the Yoga Hour. It's been my pleasure, really, to share this time with you and with Yogacharya Ellen Grace O'Brien. We've been discussing the 4 goals for spiritually conscious living, the first of our continuing series on Dharma. As I mentioned, Yogacharya is the founder of and spiritual director of the Center for Spiritual Enlightenment and of Carry the Vision, a secular nonprofit organization dedicated to restoring lives and communities through nonviolence education, creating a peaceful and compassionate world. And again, we wanted to specifically call your attention to the Dharma 365 program, the website ellengraceobrian.com, and for CSE, Center for Spiritual Enlightenment, the website csecenter.org. Join